You know, Hollywood has given us some of the most iconic love stories ever told, but what happens when the cameras stop rolling and real life takes over? What happens when a man who's played heroes on screen faces his own personal tragedy? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most shocking celebrity breakups that left everyone speechless. Kevin Costner, the legendary actor we all grew up watching, the man who made us believe in love through movies like The Bodyguard and Bull Durham, found himself in the middle of a divorce that nobody saw coming. But here's the twist that'll make your jaw drop. It all started with something his wife found in his car. Something so unexpected, so revealing, that it changed everything in an instant. Stick around because what we're about to reveal will completely change how you see one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Kevin Costner has always been America's golden boy. From his breakout role in The Untouchables to his Oscar-winning masterpiece Dances with Wolves, he's been the definition of success. Women wanted him, men wanted to be him, and everyone believed he had it all figured out. He wasn't just an actor, he was a symbol of integrity, strength, and old-fashioned values. When he married Christine Baumgartner in 2004, it seemed like the perfect Hollywood ending. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and seemed to be his perfect match. They built a life together in their stunning Santa Barbara estate, raised 3 children, and from the outside, everything looked absolutely perfect. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving, and sometimes the cracks in a relationship run deeper than anyone can see from the outside. For nearly 2 decades, Kevin and Christine seemed inseparable. They were spotted at red carpet events, family outings, and charity galas, always presenting a united front. Christine wasn't just a Hollywood wife standing in her husband's shadow. She had her own successful career as a handbag designer, running her own business and making a name for herself in the fashion world. She was independent, strong-willed, and by all accounts, the perfect partner for someone with Kevin's demanding career. They seemed to have found that rare balance between personal ambition and family life. Their children were thriving, Kevin's career was still going strong with hits like Yellowstone bringing him back into the spotlight, and their property portfolio was worth millions. Everything pointed to a couple who had weathered the storms of Hollywood and come out stronger on the other side. But then came May 2023, and everything changed. Christine filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, which is Hollywood speak for something went terribly wrong, but we're not ready to tell you what. The entertainment world went into a frenzy. Tabloids scrambled for information, fans expressed their shock on social media, and everyone wanted to know what could possibly have broken up a marriage that seemed so solid. The timing was particularly interesting because it came right after Kevin's massive success with Yellowstone, a show that had made him more relevant than he'd been in years. He was experiencing a career renaissance, finally getting the recognition he deserved for his incredible talent. So why now? Why would a marriage fall apart at what should have been a celebratory moment in his life? Here's where things get really interesting, and this is the part that most people don't know about. According to sources close to the couple, the final straw wasn't about money, infidelity in the traditional sense, or even the usual Hollywood problems of conflicting schedules and ego clashes. It was something far more personal and, in some ways, more devastating. Christine had allegedly found something in Kevin's car that completely shattered her trust and made her realize that the man she married wasn't the man she thought he was. Now, before we reveal exactly what she found, let's talk about what was really going on behind the scenes of this seemingly perfect marriage, because the truth is far more complex and fascinating than any movie script Kevin has ever worked on. The couple had been living increasingly separate lives for years before the divorce filing. Kevin's work on Yellowstone required him to spend months at a time filming in Montana, away from the family home in California. While long-distance arrangements aren't uncommon in Hollywood marriages, this particular situation created a unique strain. Christine was essentially a single parent for large portions of the year, managing 3 children, her business, and the household while Kevin was off playing one of television's most iconic characters. Friends of the couple say that resentment had been building for years, with Christine feeling like she was always the one making sacrifices while Kevin pursued his passion projects. She had put her own dreams on hold countless times to support his career, and after nearly 20 years, she was tired of always coming second to his ambitions. But the real bombshell came when Christine decided to clean out Kevin's car one afternoon. It was a seemingly innocent task. She was organizing the garage and noticed his vehicle was cluttered with papers, coffee cups, and the usual debris that accumulates during a busy filming schedule. What she found, however, was anything but ordinary. Hidden beneath a stack of scripts and production schedules, Christine discovered detailed financial documents that Kevin had never mentioned to her. These weren't just regular bank statements or investment reports, they were plans for a future that clearly didn't include her. Documents outlining property purchases in other states, business ventures she knew nothing about, and most devastatingly, a prenuptial agreement modification that Kevin had been discussing with lawyers without her knowledge. The prenup issue became the nuclear bomb that destroyed whatever foundation was left in their marriage. When they got married in 2004, they had signed a prenuptial agreement, which is standard practice for wealthy celebrities. Kevin had already been through one divorce with his first wife, Cindy Silver, which had cost him an estimated $80 million, so protecting his assets the second time around made sense. But what Christine found in that car suggested that Kevin had been working with attorneys to further strengthen that prenup, potentially limiting what she would receive in case of a divorce. The timing was particularly suspicious because it coincided with his Yellowstone success and the massive payday that came with it. It appeared that as Kevin's wealth grew, he became increasingly concerned about protecting it from Christine, even though she had been by his side through thick and thin for nearly 2 decades. Think about how that must have felt for Christine. She had spent years supporting this man, raising his children, managing their home, and sacrificing her own career opportunities so he could chase his dreams. And now, in the midst of his greatest professional triumph, he was secretly working to ensure that if they ever split, she would get as little as possible. It wasn't just about the money, although let's be real, money matters when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. It was about the betrayal, the lack of trust, and the realization that her husband had been planning for their potential divorce while still sleeping in the same bed with her every night. That kind of deception cuts deeper than any affair could, because it strikes at the very heart of what marriage is supposed to be about: partnership, trust, and facing the future together. The documents also revealed something else that added salt to the wound. Kevin had been consulting with his lawyers about custody arrangements and visitation schedules for their 3 children. This meant he wasn't just thinking about protecting his money, he was actively planning for a life after Christine, complete with detailed schedules about when he would and wouldn't have to deal with the kids. For a mother who had been the primary caregiver for years, this was devastating. It suggested that Kevin had been mentally and emotionally checked out of the marriage long before Christine had any idea there was a problem. While she was planning family vacations and thinking about their future together, he was in meetings with attorneys, discussing exit strategies like their marriage was a business deal that had stopped being profitable. But wait, there's more to this story that makes it even more complicated. According to insiders, the financial documents weren't the only thing Christine found in that car. There were also text messages and emails, printed out, which seems old-fashioned but turned out to be significant, that revealed Kevin had been confiding in other women about his marital problems. Now, these weren't necessarily romantic or sexual relationships, but they were emotionally intimate in a way that crossed boundaries Christine thought were reserved for their marriage. He was sharing details about their private life, complaining about feeling trapped, and seeking emotional support from women who weren't his wife. In some ways, this emotional infidelity hurt worse than if he'd just had a straightforward affair, because it showed a level of disconnection and disrespect that ran deep. The text messages painted a picture of a man who felt suffocated by domestic life, who resented the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood, and who saw his family as obstacles to his freedom rather than his greatest accomplishment. One particularly damning message allegedly talked about how he couldn't wait to finish his contractual obligations, and reading between the lines, it wasn't clear if he was talking about his Yellowstone contract or his marriage vows. For Christine, reading those words must have been like watching her entire life together with Kevin reframed as a burden he'd been enduring rather than a joy he'd been experiencing. Every family dinner, every school play, every vacation she'd thought they were enjoying together suddenly looked different through this new lens. Now, let's talk about the aftermath of this discovery, because this is where the story gets really messy. Instead of confronting Kevin immediately, Christine did something smart. She documented everything. She took photos of the documents, forwarded the emails to herself, and basically built a case before ever saying a word to her husband. This wasn't the action of an impulsive, emotional woman. This was strategic thinking by someone who realized she needed to protect herself and her children. When she finally did confront Kevin, she came armed with evidence and a plan. She had already consulted with her own attorneys, who confirmed that some of what Kevin had been trying to do with the prenup modification might not even be legal without her knowledge and consent. The confrontation, according to those close to the situation, was explosive. Kevin apparently tried to downplay the significance of what she'd found, claiming he was just being prudent and planning for every possibility. He insisted that the conversations with other women were harmless and that she was overreacting to what was essentially just financial planning. But Christine wasn't buying it. She had spent nearly 20 years learning to read Kevin Costner, and she knew when he was performing. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a miscommunication, this was a fundamental betrayal of their partnership. The man she had trusted with her life, her children, and her future had been preparing to push her aside the moment it became convenient for him. What makes this situation even more complex is the financial empire at stake. Kevin Costner isn't just wealthy, he's extraordinarily wealthy, with an estimated net worth of over $250 million at the time of the divorce filing. This includes his earnings from decades of blockbuster films, his Yellowstone salary which reportedly reached $1.2 million per episode, real estate holdings across multiple states, and various business ventures. The Santa Barbara estate alone, where the family lived, is worth tens of millions and sits on multiple acres of prime California coastline. There are also properties in Colorado, Montana, and other locations that Kevin accumulated over the years. Dividing this empire was never going to be simple, and both sides knew that the prenup would be the key battleground. Christine's legal team argued that she was entitled to a significant portion of the wealth accumulated during their marriage, regardless of what the prenup said. California is a community property state, which means that anything earned during the marriage is generally considered jointly owned. Kevin's massive Yellowstone earnings all came during their marriage, which meant Christine had a legitimate claim to a substantial portion of that money. Her lawyers also argued that she had sacrificed her own career to support Kevin's, giving up opportunities and earning potential to be a full-time mother and manager of the household. This wasn't just about being a celebrity wife. Christine had been a partner in building Kevin's empire, even if her name wasn't on the credits or the paychecks. Kevin's legal team, on the other hand, dug in hard on the prenup. They argued that Christine had signed the agreement willingly, with full legal representation, and that she understood exactly what she was agreeing to. They painted a picture of Christine as someone who had lived an incredibly privileged life thanks to Kevin's success and that she would still walk away with millions, even with the prenup in place. The battle became not just about money, but about narratives: who was the victim, who was the villain, and who deserved public sympathy. Kevin's team worked overtime to control the public perception, emphasizing his long career, his charitable work, and his role as a father, while trying to subtly suggest that Christine was motivated purely by greed. But here's where public opinion started to turn against Kevin, and this is crucial to understanding how this story became such a cultural moment. People started to see through the narrative his team was trying to spin. Here was a man worth hundreds of millions of dollars, fighting tooth and nail to minimize what his wife of nearly 20 years would receive in a divorce. A woman who had been with him through career ups and downs, who had raised his children, who had sacrificed her own ambitions for his success. The optics were terrible. Social media exploded with commentary about how this was a perfect example of how even the most seemingly progressive, likable men in Hollywood could reveal themselves to be petty and vindictive when it came to divorce. The hashtag that started trending wasn't supportive of Kevin, it was critical, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of discovering betrayals and financial deceptions in their relationships. The court proceedings dragged on for months, with both sides filing motion after motion. One of the most contentious issues became the family home. The prenup specified that Christine would have to vacate the Santa Barbara property within a certain time frame after filing for divorce. Kevin's team pushed for this aggressively, wanting her and the children out of the house quickly. Christine fought back, arguing that uprooting the children from their home in the middle of a traumatic divorce was cruel and unnecessary, especially since Kevin had other properties where he could stay. The judge initially sided with Kevin on this issue, ordering Christine to leave by a specific date, but the public backlash was so intense that it became a major story in itself. People were outraged that a man with multiple homes was forcing the mother of his children out of the only home those kids had ever known. Christine's decision to fight back publicly was a calculated risk, but it paid off. She gave a carefully worded interview where she didn't trash Kevin or reveal dirty laundry, but made it clear that she was standing up for herself and her children. She talked about the importance of teaching her kids, especially her daughters, that they should never accept being devalued or pushed aside. She spoke about building her handbag business from scratch and how she had always maintained her independence even within the marriage. The interview resonated with millions of women who saw their own struggles reflected in her story. Suddenly, this wasn't just a celebrity divorce. It became a cultural conversation about power dynamics in marriages, financial equality, and the hidden costs women pay when they prioritize their partner's career over their own. Behind the scenes, the legal battle was even nastier than what made it into public view. There were disputes about Kevin's actual earnings, with Christine's team arguing that he had hidden or underreported income to reduce what she would be entitled to. They subpoenaed production companies, studios, and Kevin's business managers, digging through years of financial records. Kevin's team accused Christine of hiring forensic accountants to go on fishing expeditions, trying to find money that didn't exist. The legal fees on both sides reportedly climbed into the millions, which seems insane until you remember that they were fighting over hundreds of millions in assets. Even spending $5 or $10 million on lawyers made economic sense if it meant securing a more favorable split of the overall estate. The child support and custody arrangements added another layer of complexity. Kevin wanted joint custody but also wanted to maintain his filming schedule, which meant he would realistically only have the kids for limited periods throughout the year. Christine wanted primary physical custody with Kevin having visitation rights, which seemed reasonable given that she had been the primary caregiver throughout the marriage. The child support numbers being discussed were staggering. Christine was reportedly asking for nearly $250,000 per month to maintain the lifestyle the children were accustomed to. Kevin's team argued this was excessive, but Christine's lawyers pointed out that this was a tiny fraction of Kevin's monthly income and that the children deserved to maintain the same standard of living they'd always known. What really turned the tide in Christine's favor was when details emerged about exactly how much Kevin was earning from Yellowstone and its spin-offs. The numbers were even higher than initially reported, and it became clear that Kevin had been downplaying his income in court filings. This damaged his credibility with the judge and made Christine's claims about financial dishonesty seem more credible. The discovery of these discrepancies led to a more thorough investigation of Kevin's finances, which revealed a complex web of corporations, trusts, and investment vehicles that seemed designed to obscure his true wealth. While all of this was probably legal, it painted a picture of someone who had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect his money, even from his own wife. As the divorce battle raged on, Kevin's professional life continued, but the controversy definitely affected his public image. Yellowstone fans were divided, with some standing by their favorite actor and others feeling disappointed by the revelations about his personal life. Kevin tried to maintain a business-as-usual approach, showing up for premieres and press events, but the questions about his divorce were unavoidable. His attempts to redirect conversations back to his work often came across as tone-deaf, especially when he was promoting a show about family loyalty and moral codes while simultaneously fighting to minimize his financial obligations to his own family. The irony wasn't lost on critics, who pointed out the disconnect between the characters Kevin played and the man he appeared to be in real life. Eventually, after months of legal warfare, the case headed toward a settlement. Neither side was getting everything they wanted, which usually means the settlement was probably fair. Christine didn't get the full community property split she was fighting for, but she also got substantially more than the prenup originally specified. Kevin maintained control of most of his business empire and real estate holdings, but had to pay Christine a substantial lump sum settlement plus ongoing support. The exact numbers were sealed by the court, but estimates from legal experts suggest Christine walked away with somewhere between $60 and $80 million in cash and assets, plus generous child support payments. For context, that's less than she would have gotten in a straight community property split, but far more than the prenup would have given her. The custody arrangement ended up being more generous to Christine than Kevin's team initially wanted, with her getting primary physical custody and Kevin having visitation rights that worked around his filming schedule. The children would stay in private school in California, maintaining their social connections and stability. Kevin was responsible for all education expenses, medical costs, and extracurricular activities. The settlement also included provisions about how the children would be introduced to any future romantic partners, how holidays would be split, and numerous other details that attempted to minimize the impact of the divorce on the kids. But here's what this whole saga really revealed, and why it matters beyond just celebrity gossip. Kevin Costner's divorce became a mirror that reflected uncomfortable truths about marriage, power, and money in America. It showed how even in seemingly equal partnerships, there are often massive power imbalances that only become visible when the relationship ends. Christine had been wealthy by normal standards, but she was entirely dependent on Kevin's goodwill for her lifestyle and security. When that goodwill evaporated, she had to fight tooth and nail for what she believed she was owed, facing off against a man with vastly greater resources and a team of expensive lawyers determined to minimize her payout. The story also highlighted how women's unpaid labor in marriages, raising children, managing households, providing emotional support, is systematically devalued when it comes time to divide assets. Christine spent nearly 20 years as Kevin's partner, but because she wasn't the one earning the paycheck, her contributions were treated as less important. The prenup itself embodied this inequality, having been written when Kevin had all the leverage and Christine was just happy to be marrying a movie star. By the time she realized how one-sided the agreement was, she had already invested decades of her life into the relationship. This is a pattern that plays out in divorces at every income level, but it's particularly visible when the numbers are this large. What Christine found in that car, the financial documents, the legal strategies, the evidence of emotional disconnection, was really just physical proof of something she had probably been feeling for years. The marriage had become transactional for Kevin, more about protecting his assets and maintaining his freedom than about genuine partnership. The discovery simply made undeniable what her instincts had been telling her for a long time. In that sense, finding those documents might have been the best thing that could have happened to her, because it gave her the clarity and motivation to finally walk away from a relationship that had stopped serving her years earlier. For Kevin, this divorce has been a massive hit to both his wallet and his reputation. He went from being a beloved Hollywood icon to being seen as just another wealthy man trying to shortchange his ex-wife. Whether that reputation damage will have long-term consequences for his career remains to be seen, but it certainly changed how many people view him. The image of the principled, honorable hero he's played in countless movies has been replaced by the image of a man fighting to keep every penny he can from the woman who raised his children. That's not a brand rehabilitation that happens quickly or easily. The divorce was finalized in early 2024, bringing an end to nearly a year of legal warfare. Both Kevin and Christine released brief statements about moving forward and focusing on co-parenting their children, using the bland, PR-approved language that divorcing celebrities always use. But the real story isn't in those official statements. It's in what this case revealed about the hidden dynamics of celebrity marriages and the price women pay for hitching their wagons to powerful men's stars. Christine is now rebuilding her life, focusing on her children and her business, with the financial security to never have to depend on anyone else again. Kevin is back at work, probably trying to forget this whole messy chapter and restore his tarnished image. Looking at this situation from every angle, it's hard not to feel that Kevin Costner made some terrible choices that cost him not just money, but something far more valuable, his integrity. He could have handled the divorce with grace and generosity, acknowledging Christine's contributions and ensuring she was taken care of without a brutal legal fight. Instead, he chose to fight, to minimize, to protect every dollar like it was the last dollar in the world, even though he had more money than he could ever spend. That choice revealed something about his character that no movie role could ever hide. It showed that when the chips were down, Kevin Costner chose money over dignity, wealth over honor, and financial victory over doing the right thing. This whole saga serves as a cautionary tale about prenuptial agreements, about the importance of maintaining your independence even within a marriage, and about being prepared for the possibility that the person you're sleeping next to might be planning a future that doesn't include you. Christine Baumgartner learned that lesson the hardest way possible, but she came out the other side stronger, wealthier, and free from a marriage that had clearly stopped working years before it officially ended. And that car, with its pile of incriminating documents, might have been the worst place Kevin Costner ever chose to stash his secrets, but it ended up being Christine's ticket to freedom and the truth she needed to finally escape.